Wait a minute, cut this shit.
Good evening, everyone. How you doing? My name is Lee Love, and this is the Photo Mentor question and answer period. Every Friday night, we do this at 9 p.m. Eastern, and I guess at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And if you're in other parts of the world, that would probably be 0100 UTC, Universal Coordinated Time. Anyway, thanks for joining us. And this is where we get a chance to answer your questions about photography. It's we can answer all kinds of questions. If you are a new photographer, especially, this is designed for you and to be able to give you solid answers and to your questions that maybe you can't get anywhere else. The reason that I started this quite a while back in Photo Mentor in general is because I just felt there was a lack of knowledge and solid knowledge that's being shared in groups and Facebook forums and things like that. And so the idea here is to kind of help you get a little more experienced answers to your questions is the idea. Anyway, so that's why we do it. If you would like to ask your question, then you are free to go ahead and put a Q. You can leave a comment in the Facebook group on the Facebook comment page, or we're also on YouTube. You can go to youtube.photomentor.tv, or you can go to Facebook. If you're on YouTube, you can go to facebook.photomentor.tv, and it'll take you to the Facebook page. Either place you can leave questions, and they'll show up here on my screen. If you put a Q and a colon in front of your question, then that'll pop right up here, and I'll be able to answer that question, hopefully, or at least I'll see it. Let's have it that way. Tonight's going to be a little weird, I think, maybe because I broke two cardinal rules. One is my own, and the other one is a IT cardinal rule, and that is that I upgraded my machine today, and I was working on it for quite a few hours. I put in some new memory or storage, actually some faster storage. And then I had to update some software and things like that. So the problem is I never, ever like to do updates or make any kind of changes to my system before I'm going to use it. Like, for example, a camera is a good example. I never update the firmware before I go out on a shoot. I always update it at home when I'm going to be home for a week or so, and I can work on it, play with it, and try it, and see if there's any bugs or anything that's going to crop up. Same thing for here. So I don't know. I got a few things that I'm not sure are quite working right. But so if the show goes haywire tonight, then I'll blame it on that. So anyway. The other thing is that I started doing this, and let's see, this was here. I started doing this last week, and this is that I do on the first of every month, or the first Friday of every month, I do a review. You can submit your images, and I'll do a portfolio review for you. And the idea is you can submit up to 3 images per month. Don't want to overload them. I've already gotten some for next month. The reviews will be anonymous, so that you don't have to worry about being embarrassed or anything. I'm not going to criticize anybody. My goal here is to encourage, not discourage you. But in case you are a little bit nervous about that, you can go ahead and submit your images to me. And when I review them, it'll be anonymous, so you don't have to worry about that. I'll look at the images to see how they work as far on items like composition, whether they work technically, and whether the subject matter works, whether I think you're getting the story across and communicating the subject matter well. Again, it'll be on the same show we do here. It's our first Friday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And if you would like to submit some images, I would ask you to email me at help@photomentor.tv and put the word review in the subject. That way it gets filtered out so I don't get mixed up with all the other emails I get. And I'll give you instructions. I'm trying to automate this, but right now just send me an email and I'll be glad to give you that information. So anyway, if you want your pictures, images reviewed and some feedback on them, I'm happy to do that. And I think so far it's been encouraging to people that gotten good feedback. They felt it was helpful. And so first Friday of every month, be sure and you can send them to me anytime. Also, I should mention that if you have questions, although we talked about asking questions during the show, you can also email me at help@photomentor.tv. And if you have general questions that maybe you don't want to ask during the show, or maybe you're watching this on a replay, which we appreciate, by the way. And so you can send them that way, and I'll answer them directly. I'll reply, or I will put them on the show for next week. Anyway, so that's what we've got going on for this week. So let's see how it goes here. If we crash and burn, I noticed that there is some you may not notice, but some lag or something in the video. It's not looking quite right. So I've got something I got to work on. But anyway, that's just me, just kind of picky about this kind of stuff. And I also don't know why this light is going on and off tonight. Kind of distracting. Okay, so let's see what the first question we have tonight is. The first question is from, and I'm not even going to pronounce this right. I'm just going to call him Raj. Can I take good portraits using a Nikon D3200? And the answer is yes. You can actually take good portraits with any camera. Now, I know that sounds, cliche and everybody does that, but it really goes down to your technique. And this is something that I preach out a lot. And that is, I say that technique trumps technology, meaning that if you have a good technique and you have skills, it doesn't matter what camera you have. It doesn't matter what lens you have. It doesn't matter the situation. Now, it may not be perfect. Okay. It may have some limitations, but at least you will be able to, get a decent picture out of the, and portraits are no different. If I remember right, the D3200 is a 24 megapixel camera, so it's got plenty of resolution. What I would suggest is that a couple of things. Number one, watch your background. You want to make sure that your background is not too busy or it's distracting. And maybe have the background reinforce the subject matter. In fact, if you're going to if you're doing a senior portrait, for example, and the person they're into sports, then you could do something on the football field or something with a sports theme. It doesn't have to be obvious. It can be just in the background. But but out of focus, but that way it kind of helps convey that. So you can definitely do that with a D3200. Now, you're probably if you only have one lens, you probably only have the lens that came with it, which is the 18 to 55 millimeter lens. It's I think a 3.5 to 4.6 or 3.5 to 5.6. I forget. But so what you want to do is this: zoom all the way in to 55 millimeter and then back up. So you got the framing of what the subject matter is. And that will then give you a little more. There's two things that does. One, it helps blur the background, because the depth of field, in other words, what's in focus, is not just determined by the aperture, but it's also determined by the distance and the focal length. So that's the first thing you want to do. The second thing is go to aperture priority, A on your camera, and turn that the wheel so that the aperture is open all the way. Now, if you're 55, it's probably going to be, again, it's probably going to be 4.5 or 5.6, but that's okay. And the next thing is try and connect with your subject matter. I mean, that's really the key. No one knows what settings you're using. Nobody knows you're shooting on manual or auto or whatever. They don't know any of that stuff. All they know is that the picture works or doesn't work. Also, try not. A mistake I see a lot of people do is they'll. Let's see here. We'll do this. They will when they do that, when they frame the subject. I've noticed that they'll put the subject right in the center, and then there's all this headroom at the top of the frame for some reason, and I don't know why. It's like sky or something, and it really doesn't contribute to the picture at all. So put the person at the top. If you've got grass or something, you're doing them in a field, then put the person at the top of the frame and put the grass at the bottom, and even get down kind of low if you want. Um, uh, Depending on what you're trying to do, the eye line is very, very important. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So the point is, a D3200 can do decent portraits. Everybody that you talk to is going to say, oh, you're going to have a 35 millimeter or 50 millimeter 1.8. Yes, those are nice lenses. They're primes. They're non-zooms. They're nice and sharp. But if you don't have one, you don't have one. Just use the lens you have. The D3200 can definitely take decent portraits if you have good technique. So hopefully that helps. Okay, let's see what the next one is here. The next question is, can you give me some advice on keeping focus on multiple people? Sure. Okay, so again, a couple of things. One of the mistakes that I think people make, especially new photographers, is they don't quite understand that focus is only front to back. Focus is only here to here. It's not side to side. In other words, if I move over here or I move over here, the focus is going to stay. If I have a line of people, 10 people, and they're all lined up shoulder to shoulder, all of those people are going to be in focus as long as the one person is in focus. Now, that's not typically the way you do a group photo, multiple people. You typically have people that are behind each other. So when they're behind a person, then that focus point is going to change, or not the focus point, but the depth of field, what's going to be in focus. Now, this can get kind of complicated and difficult to explain, but the easy answer is, again, shoot on aperture priority, and then you adjust the aperture and set your aperture to be, again, let's assume you're using an 18 to 55 millimeter lens. You don't have a bunch of lenses. Or even if you have a 50 millimeter, it doesn't matter. You can still shoot at 4.5, 5.6, f8. If you do that, what's going to happen is it's going to give you more depth of field. More is going to be in focus. Probably about 5 feet. I'd have to calculate it, but about 5 feet is going to be in focus. So that means the person in the front is going to be in focus, and the person in the behind is going to be in focus. Most of the reason people's group shots are out of focus, the people in the back, is because they're not using a small enough aperture. Everybody tells them they got to use 1.8 and they want that nice blurry background. Well, you get the blurry background, but the problem at 1.8, you can get, if you depending on how close you are, you can get a person's nose in focus and their eyes out of focus. So you just close that aperture down, and that'll give you more depth of field. The other thing is you can, if you get closer, that depth of field is going to even be shallower. So if you back up, then that'll give you more depth of field as well. More will be in focus. But the main thing, the easiest thing, is to make sure that you are using the right aperture. Again, f8 is halfway in the middle. It's also going to be the sharpest point of the lens, probably f8, f11, and you're going to get plenty of depth of field depending on the lens. And so anyway, so it's better to have everybody in focus as opposed to not having a blurry background and the people be out of focus. So that's one thing. The other thing you can do is just check your camera ahead of time, though. Make sure, set it up. Take I don't have one here, but take a ruler or something. Take a ruler and put put lines on it and put it at an angle, kind of like this. Okay. And then focus on the middle part, like maybe 6 inches. And then when you focus there, then look and see if the focus is out of focus and out of focus in the front and the back. What happens sometimes, and this is it's not all the time, but sometimes there's lenses that they have called back focus. What happens is when you focus, let's say on the 6, the camera will actually focus on the 7 or the 8. And the reason is there's an adjustment in the camera to compensate. Just a little bit off between the camera and the lens. Depending on the camera, not all cameras have that adjustment capability. The lower end ones typically don't. But so that just make sure so you know the lens is working properly is what I'm trying to get across. That way you're not worried about your equipment being a malfunction. And most of the time when things are out of focus, I find it's the Yahoo behind that's pushing the button that's the problem. So anyway, I'm sure that's going to be your problem as well. All right, let's see what else we got here. Let's see here. Okay, so Lee asks, quick question: what lens do I need to do landscape and wildlife photos with a Nikon D40? Well, um, any lens, Lee. Now typically, I'm not a landscape photographer. Okay, I'll say that up front, but I've spent some time doing with some friends that are excellent world-class landscape photographers, very famous, work for Park Service, which I'm actually going to, anyway, I have an interview I did with him if you're interested. But the point is, what you'll notice about landscape is a beginner will try and use a wide angle lens and they'll try and get everything in the frame. And that's okay. But with any photography, it's really about elimination. So what you want to do is have a center part of the picture, something you're trying to draw attention to, and then you want to have something in the foreground. Once again, it's kind of like I was showing the example of the other one before here, where instead of having, the person down here in the bottom and all the sky, what you want to do is, if this is a mountain or something in the wild and that you want to have, put something in the foreground, get low, have some stream or water or something that draws your attention up to the center part for doing wildlife, or excuse me, doing landscape photography. As far as a lens, any lens will work. Typically you want a little bit slightly wider, I would say, if you're using a crop sensor you said a D40, right? So maybe an 18 millimeter would be good, or a 10 to 20. Sigma makes a really nice 10 to 20 f3.5 lens, very reasonably priced. But if you don't have a wide angle lens, here's a trick I'm going to show you. Okay, so what you do is, instead of taking and shooting this way with a wide angle lens, turn your camera vertically, okay? And then shoot multiple pictures. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what you want to do is you want to overlap the picture, the previous picture, by about 20%. So you would start over here, okay, and you'd shoot, and then you move the camera about 3/4 of the way. You want to, if there's a tree or something that you had over here in this frame, you want to make sure that tree is also in the second frame. And then if you do it over and over. And then the reason for that is there's software that will then take and stitch that together and allow you to do a panorama, but it needs a little bit of that information from the previous frame. So you want to overlap those frames. I hope that makes sense to what I'm saying. About 20%. And then therefore, you can stitch them together. And the cool thing is, think about it. If you have a camera that's, I don't know, let's say it's 10 megapixels times 5, okay, and you did 5 frames. Now you got a 50 megapixel image. It's going to be super high resolution. Obviously, 24 megapixels is even going to be better. So, if you don't have a wide angle lens, that's one of the things you can do to be able to do landscapes, even though you don't have a super wide angle lens. And you might find it's actually pretty cool. Okay. Is a flash built in for most cameras? Oh, okay. So we got one question here about from Keith, and he's asking about is a flash built into most cameras? Yes, Keith. Most of the point and shoots and I would say everything from the high end, what I call prosumer cameras, like the Canon T7, or sorry, 60D, 80D, 90D. I think those all have, flashes in them. And the Nikon, the D3400, the D5600, the 7200, and the 7500 all have flashes in them, I believe. When you get into the professional camera, some of those drop the flash because they just don't need it. Um, but a built-in flash can be very handy even outdoors. Now, most people think of a built-in flash like a birthday party or something like that, but I use flash even outdoors, and the reason is it gives a little bit of that pop to the colors. So even if you have a built-in flash, I would say use it, because what it'll do is it will most of the time it will automatically adjust so it doesn't give you too much flash, but it also will put just what's a highlight in the eye, a specular highlight or a catch light in the eye, and it just makes a portrait really pop a little bit. So give that a try if you have a camera with a built-in flash in it, and see how that works for you. So yeah, built-in flash is a good thing. You can also use a built-in flash to trigger an external flash. So a lot of the speed lights which go on the camera will have an optical trigger. So you can put that off somewhere else, and when the flash in the camera goes off, it will trigger the other one, which is going to be more powerful. So you don't actually see the one in the camera, but the other one will get triggered. I've done that many times when been in a jam and I've forgotten something or broke or whatever. Okay, let's see. So I hope that helps, Lee, and your question about the landscape. Okay, Yvette asks, I'm renting a 24-70 Canon lens. Has anyone used it? And what shooting mode do you shoot in? Okay, first of all, the Canon or the Nikon 24-70 f2.8 are excellent lenses. They're really good quality. I think they're really, now most of the time this is on a full frame camera. I assume that's what she's doing, but even if it's not, it will give you a great focal length. I refer to it as my meat and potatoes lens, because if I'm going on a shoot somewhere and I only have one lens to carry with me, it's going to be the 24-70. The reason is it's wide enough. I can do something interesting. I can get creative. I can do a group shot or something like that. But then at 70, I can get a little bit closer, and I can also do a portrait, headshot, that kind of thing. And it's a 2.8 lens, meaning it's 2.8 whether at 24 millimeter or 70 millimeter. So great lens, very sharp, really good lens all around. It's definitely worth your investment to purchase a 24-70. So. Okay, so Morgan asks, my sister has a Canon Rebel XTI that she's willing to sell me, but it's pretty old. Morgan, I would suggest that you stay away from the XTI. I believe, I might not be totally right about this, but it was one of the very first or early Canon digital cameras. It's not worth a whole lot. I mean, if you tried to trade it in somewhere, they might give you $20 for it. So really your sister should just give it to you, quite honestly. But that's a whole nother deal. That's a family issue. I won't get in the middle of that. But so I would stay. So here's what happens. I see a lot of people that try and buy used cameras to save some money. So you may go in and buy a used XTI or even a T3i or something like that, or a Nikon D70 or D200, which was a very good camera. And those cameras were great in their day, but they're kind of old. And so what happens is every generation of camera that comes out, you can count on, there's going to be more, but just generally there's two features you can always count on that a new camera system is going to have. And that's going to be, it's going to have better focusing and better low light performance. The ISO performance is always going to be improved every generation of camera. So this camera, I think, goes maybe to 1600 ISO, which is not very good. And I don't imagine even an ISO 1600, the images are that clean. Where nowadays you can get a camera will do 3200, 6400, 12,800. It really goes up. Now, why is that important? It's important because think about every time you double the ISO performance of your camera. Let's say we go from 200 to 400. That is basically letting in twice the amount of light. That's the same thing as going from essentially an f3.5 lens to an f2.8 lens. Actually, it's not quite the same. but a little, but close. So if you go from 200 to 400, that's like now all of a sudden you got a 2.8 lens. Now optically they're different. You understand what I'm saying? You're not getting the same look as a 2.8 lens, but you get that much more light in. You get twice the amount of light. So if you can go from 400 to 800, now your lens goes from a 2.8 to like a 1.8, and so forth and so on. So the higher the ISO performance, the less the more money you save in lenses. So in other words, if you go from, here's an example. If you go from an 85 millimeter 1.8, let's say Nikon lens, I think that lens, I'm going to take a wild guess, I think it's around $400 or $500. Canon's probably about the same price. To go from an 85 millimeter 1.8 to an 85 millimeter 1.4, which is not much difference, the price jumps to about $1,800 for a Nikon and about the same for a Canon. So you can see the difference. So if you can get more capability, lower light performance out of a camera just by changing the ISO performance and not getting any noise or not being really distorted or a lot of chroma noise, then it's really well worth the money. So I would say stay away from the XTI. Try and find something a little newer. You're fine. The price is going to be pretty close anyway. You can get if you look at like the Nikon D3500, I think is the model number. Yeah, it's D3500. That's the entry level camera for Nikon. I believe the T7 is the entry level for Canon, or pretty close to it. But the Nikon will go around $449. But occasionally, when we come up on these the holidays, that camera will go down to, sometimes they'll run it at $396. So for $400, you get a brand new camera, 1 year warranty on the body, 5 years on the lens, and the latest and greatest technology, 24 megapixels, probably an ISO performance of 12,800 or even more. So, you know, if you buy a camera like the XTI or T3i, you're probably going to spend at least $200 on it, maybe $250. And so you're not really that far off. So I think you just would be better off looking at something a little newer. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Keith has another question for us tonight. And his question is, what is the highest zoom you can use for moon photography? Well, there isn't a highest zoom. I mean, the longer, the better. I've used a 400 millimeter and a 600 millimeter, and they're okay. You get somewhat close, but still, you got to remember, it depends actually on where the moon is in its circle. I mean, if it's out far enough away, that would be at its apogee, I think. And then, in other words, whenever it's at its closest to the Earth, then you may not need as much as zoom. Again, if you have a camera that's 24 megapixels or higher, you can crop the picture and still not lose that much quality. The trick in photographing the moon, though, is remember the moon is a light bulb, meaning it's bright. And the mistake happens when you shoot with a camera. Most cameras, the camera sees all this black around this bright spot, and so it tries to turn up the gain, or it tries to expose for all the black, and the moon gets overexposed and there's no detail. It's all washed out. So you're either better off on shooting on aperture or manual, and just change on aperture. Just change the aperture so it's closer. You don't need a lot of light. Again, the moon is very, very bright. So you're going to find that what I would do is this. I would go to auto, take a picture, then go and look at the back of the camera and look at what the camera says the settings were. Okay, it's going to be too bright. I'm pretty sure it's going to be no detail. Look at what the camera said. Then go to manual, punch in those exact same settings. Let's say it says it's, I don't know, I'll make something up, f8 at 1/25th of a second. Then if that's then put that into manual, and then either close the aperture down or the shutter speed. So let's say if it's, probably the shutter speed would be better. So go from, what I say it was 1/25th to 2/50th, and then see if that works. If it's, you can get more detail. If it's not 250, go to 320, and until you get the exposure just right. That's what I would do. Okay, let's see what else we got here. So Mandy asked, a friend has suggested I get a Canon or a Tamron 18-200 lens, which is a lot cheaper than the 70-200. I assume what she's asking is advice on that. Well, they're really two different, they're like apples and oranges. The 18-200 Tamron, by the way, is a good lens, and it's inexpensive. I think it goes on sale all the time for like $199. Normally it's $249, but even at $249, it's a great deal. It's got stable image stabilization. I think they call it VC for vibration control. And it's a really good lens for the money. And the nice thing about the 18-200 is it's what I call a carry lens, meaning you only have to have that one lens. You really don't have to switch lenses very often unless you're going to go to a 50 millimeter prime or something like that. It's just a good all around lens. Now, the problem with it though, if there is a problem, not really a problem, but it's a variable lens, a variable aperture lens, meaning at 18, the widest opening may be, let's just say 3.5. So what that means is when you're zoomed out at 18 millimeter and the the biggest amount of light, the most amount of light you can let into the camera is going to be at f3.5. If you don't touch anything else on the lens, but just zoom from 18 to 200, the lens is automatically going to close down the aperture and go down to, let's say, 4.5, or I think it's 5.6, or maybe even 6.3. I'd have to look. But the point is, you're going to get less light. So when you're zoomed all the way in, the lens is going to let less light in than when you're zoomed all the way out. That's called a variable aperture. A fixed aperture, like the 70-200, says, now, if you set it at 2.8, at 70 millimeters, it's going to be at 2.8, and at 200, it's going to be at 2.8. Now, when I say fixed, the misnomer means you can't change it. That's not what I'm saying. You have the same settings you do as any other lens, 2.8, 3.5, f8, f11, f14, f22, but it will not change depending on the zoom range. That's a fixed aperture lens, where the 18-200 is a variable aperture. So it really, Mandy, it really depends on your budget. If you can afford the 70-200, definitely get it. I would say try and rent it. The only problem is when you rent it, you're going to fall in love with it. It's just a really nice lens. And, you're not going to want to get rid of it, or you're going to want to buy one. I tell this story all the time. I don't know if I've told you guys, but in 2004, I was switching from film to digital, and I bought a Nikon 70-200. It was about $1,800. It was a lot of money. I didn't want to spend the money. I was like, maybe I should get something else. And my wife's like, no, get the Nikon. Because she knows me, she knows that I wouldn't be happy. So I had that lens up till maybe a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, and I finally sold it because I thought I wanted a newer one, which I thought was a little sharper. Well, the point is, I had that lens a long time. It made me a lot of money. It was a great lens, nothing wrong with it. And honestly, I can't see any difference between that one and the new one. So I think I should have just kept it and saved some money. But anyway, 70-200, great lens. Highly recommend it. 2.8 if your budget can afford it. If you can't afford the Canon one, take a look at the Tamron or the Sigma. Tamron has a 70-200 f2.8 G2 generation 2. I believe it runs around $1,300. Don't quote me on it. It's pretty close to that. And then Sigma they've just come out with one. Now they had an older version, the Sigma did, and may find that a little bit less money. If you get the new one, you want the Sigma Sport 70-200, and that's the newer version, better quality. And I think it's also right around $1,100 or $1,200. So anyway, both the Tamron has, I think, a 5-year warranty or 6-year warranty. Sigma has a 4-year warranty, so they're really good, good quality lenses on that. Okay. So let's see here. What do we got? Okay, so Tori asked, any suggestions for those building portfolio? What do you charge, and for how long of a session? All right, that's a big question. There's a bunch of questions in there. I'll try and unpack some of them. Okay, so if you're trying to build a portfolio, the first thing you have to figure out is what kind of stuff do you want to get hired to photograph? Um, if you want to do portraits, then build your portfolio around portraits. If you want to do weddings, then be sure and get weddings in your portfolio. The mistake that a lot of new photographers make is um, they will just everything they shoot that they like. Oh, this is a great picture. I'll put it in there. And so their portfolio becomes scattered all over the place. They've got wedding, they got family, they've got fine art, they've got, all kinds of sports in there. And so what happens when you do that is sends a message to the client. Well, I don't know what these people are good at. I mean, they got all kinds of pictures here, right? So here's my analogy. If you want to go to a Chinese restaurant, you go to a gas station or do you go to a Chinese restaurant? If you want to go to sushi, you go to a sushi bar, right? You don't go to a steak place that has sushi. You typically go to, now, there's not saying there's not some places that have a wide variety, but for the most part, if you're interested in Italian food, you go to an Italian restaurant. Why? Because you know their food is going to be good, hopefully. And it's the same thing with your photography work. You want to narrow it down and specialize in a few areas, not too many. So then people say, oh, wow, look at the wedding work. That's the person I want to hire for my wedding. Because look, they do weddings. They're a wedding photographer. And so don't spread yourself too broad for the kind of work that you want to do. Now, if you go to my website, then you would see the same thing. I do advertising, magazine work, and some corporate work. But I've done a lot of other work. I've shot architecture for magazines. I've shot weddings for friends. Not my favorite thing to do, quite honestly. But anyway, you won't find any of that work on my website. Why? Because that's not the kind of work I want to get hired to do. I only want to show the work I want to get hired to photograph. So there's nothing wrong with taking other work. Someone says, hey, can you do my wedding? Or, hey, can you shoot my some senior portraits? And great. If you don't want to do senior portraits, though, don't put them on your website. Take the money and do the work, but don't put it on your website. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, what do you charge and how long is the session? Well, that's variable. That's really hard for me to say. I'd have to look at your work. I'd have to find a little bit about your market. But what I will tell you is don't base your price necessarily on your skill level. As photographers, we never feel we're good enough. Okay. I always look at my own work and say, I could have really done better on that one. But the other people look and go, oh, that's amazing. I love that. Can I buy it? But to me, I'm like, really? You want to buy that? So I think most of us are that way. And the reason is we're creatives. Okay. So my point is don't make your rates based necessarily on your skill level. And here's why. Number one, you got a lot of equipment. You probably have at least easily $1,000 worth of equipment, maybe not quite, but close, accessories and stuff like that. You've got software, you've got computers, you've got hard drives, you've got storage, you've got all these things that raise your price or your cost. And what happens is if you charge $20 for a session, you're going to be making less than the person at McDonald's. Okay. So then why do it? So charge a reasonable rate. I would say, again, I don't know your market and I'm not trying to, but I would say if you're not charging at least $100 an hour, you're not going to be in business. You got to at least do that to break even, I think. And even then that's pretty low, but, so you can charge some packages and change. As far as the other thing, I think people make a mistake is they give away too many pictures, too many images. So, let's say they'll say, oh, $100 image for 1 hour session, you get 50 pictures. Well, first of all, nobody needs 50 pictures. There's not going to be 50 pictures that are that great, I think, out of a photo shoot, quite honestly, unless you're shooting all day for hours, but not within an hour. Then so they may think they want 50 pictures, but they want. So you up front, you want to find out how many images do they think they want. So if they say, well, what do you mean? I want all of them. Well, no, for $100, 1 hour session, you get 5 post-processed images. And then you may get some pushback on that. But so the thing is, you have to figure out that for 5 images, you've got to go through and edit them. You're now the lab, remember. So, so you're now doing the post processing, which means that you can take hours, weeks, sometimes doing, especially if you're trying to correct a mistake. So you want to know up front how many pictures they want. I would keep it 5 or below, and then if there's something else in the proofs that they want, charge them extra, or not charge them extra, charge them for that image. So what I would do is I would say, okay, if there's 5 images, if you want, there's some others in the proofs. If you want 6 or 7, that's fine. They're $45 each, and that includes the time it takes me to post process and correct and that type of thing. So anyway, I won't go into too much detail on that, but that was the way I would do it. I would say your session, the session could vary. It's all over the place. It depends on the scope of work. In other words, when somebody asks me how much I charge, there's not a price. The first thing I have to figure out is, well, tell me about what it is you want to do. What's the scope of work? In other words, if they say, oh, we just got some headshots. Okay. Is it how many people? And are they going to be in different locations? Am I going to be able to set up in one place and do all the headshots? Because if they say, oh, we wanted to do them in 3 locations, and I don't know that until I get on site, then that's going to raise the price because I have to tear down and set up and move things around. So it's the scope of work that you want to try and charge for. So anyway, I could go on and on about this. I don't mean to spend so much time on it, but it is an important topic, especially for business people that are looking to start doing a little bit of business. So Tori, I hope that helps. I'm buying my first nice camera. Should I go with a DSLR or mirrorless? No idea. I'm telling you, I shoot both. It depends on what I'm doing. It's funny. I've talked to a lot of photographers who have gone. Now, these are photographers, I'd say, that are experienced photographers. I'm not talking about some new person, not a new photographer, but as experienced photographers who have moved over to mirrorless. And they've told me more than once, I kind of miss. They still have like their D750 or their D850. And they still have the Z7 or Z6 or whatever. And they'll tell me, I miss my DSLR. Now, from a personal standpoint, and this is just me, I like a DSLR. My mirrorless cameras I use for video, not really for stills. And the reason is when I'm photographing, because I photograph a lot of people. So when I'm photographing you, I want to look through that lens and I want to see your eyes. I want to see you. If I move the camera away, I'm seeing exactly what I'm seeing through the viewfinder. I'm not seeing a representation. Now that's just me. Some people really love the mirrorless. They think that's great. They have focus peaking. There's a lot of features in there. They like it, especially a new photographer, because when they make an adjustment, it's going to adjust the picture. They're going to see exactly what the picture is going to look like. So anyway, it's just up to you. I think you're going to find that the mirrorlesses are still more expensive than a DSLR. And also the battery life is not nearly as good as a DSLR. So that's kind of one of the drawbacks. But anyway, not want to say one way or the other. I would say, look, if you're just getting started and you're saying you're getting your first nice camera, I would say if it's your first camera, go with a DSLR. You're going to get a lot more for your money than you will with a mirrorless. Okay, I want to remind you guys again, that, the first Friday of every month, we're doing a portfolio review, and you can send in up to 3 pictures to be reviewed. The reviews will be anonymous. You can, yeah, you're right, Nick. We are our own worst critic. And I never think my stuff's good enough. People are like, what, are you kidding? It's just, it's good though. You don't want to compare yourself against somebody else. You want to be comparing against yourself. It's not what other photographers do. It's what you do. And so anyway, I agree with you, Nick. That's a great comment. So you can submit up to 3 images per month to be reviewed. The reviews will be anonymous. I'll know who you are, but that's okay. I'll use some kind of initial or numbering system or whatever. And, and the review, the images will be looked to see how successful they are in the area of composition, how technically they are, and the subject matter, how well the subject matter comes across. And so again, it's not necessarily my opinion. I mean, it's somewhat my opinion, but it's really to see to give you some advice on whether I think the picture works or not. I'm not going to tell you whether I like it or not because it's very subjective. I will review them on the first Friday of the month broadcast that we do here every Friday night. And so if you'd like to participate, email me at help@photomentor.tv, and in the subject line, put the word review. And that way I can sort it out and find it, and won't get it mixed up with all the other email that I got going on. So I'd appreciate that. So if you're interested in that and you want to participate, shoot me an email. Love to see your work. I really would. Okay. Next question is from Jordan. I agreed to shoot a friend's wedding, but all I literally have is a Canon T6i and a 50mm lens, as well as a 75 to 300mm. What should I do? Shoot the wedding, Jordan. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that job. I know I preach this a lot. I apologize if you guys are tired of hearing it, but look, it's one thing I've learned a couple things, but one of the things I've learned doing this as long as I have as a photographer, as a commercial photographer, I never have enough time. The budget's usually never big enough, and I never always have all the gear I want. So that's just the way it is. So the job is to how do I get the best picture I can given those constraints. Photography is all about a compromise. It's never the weather, the lighting, something's never perfect. So it means we have to do the best we can given the limitations that we have. So your job with the 50mm and the 75 to 300 is you can shoot a wedding with that. The 50mm is going to be a little not very long, but it'll be great. It's nice, sharp, detail stuff. It'll be great for the group photos, the family photos. No reason you can't use that. The 75 to 300 might be used if you are at the back of the church or the back of wherever the venue is, and you want to get a nice tight shot of the back of the bride and groom, the kiss. Just do the best you can. I'm sure they understand you're probably doing it for free to help them out. But here's a couple of tips. I've done this in previous shows. Remember that a wedding runs kind of on a clock. Things happen at certain times. The first shot you want to get, if you want to get the bride getting dressed, or maybe with her mother putting on her veil, or whatever the situation is, but you want to get that shot. You can get some nice pictures there. The second one is you might want to get the groom and the best man. They're going to be uncooperative. They're guys. It's just the way it is. So you don't going to get much there, but you never know. Get them goofing around. Try and get them emotional. The guys are going to, the women the bride may be a little more emotional. The guys may be cutting up. I don't know. It's hard to say. Some guys may be nervous. But the point is, try and get some emotion in it. Goof on them. Play with them. And what you can do is ask the bride to tell you something about the groom that would make him laugh. Something secret. So then when you go to photograph the groom, throw that out. Be ready. But throw that out and see what kind of reaction you get. And then ask the groom what he can tell you about the bride, that you can go and get the shot of the bride. Maybe you can do this ahead of time. The bride that might get a reaction from her. Okay, so that's that. The next picture you want to get is if the person that, it's somewhat traditional wedding, whoever's giving the bride away, if it's the father or whatever, friend, whoever's giving you definitely want to get that shot. You want to get them coming down the aisle. Then you want to get them at the altar when they're sitting there, when they're doing their vows, and you definitely want to get the kiss. Don't miss the kiss. Get them coming back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Jones. And from there, it's kind of, you're on your own. You're going to get some family shots, that type of thing. You're going to get some detailed shots of the cake, of the ring, and that kind of thing. And the rest of it's kind of just, you never know what you're going to get. It's going to be a little bit haphazard. The 50mm probably pretty good for that. It's tough. It's like herding cats. They're going to, you got to be able to tell them what you want them to do. And when you're doing the family stuff, if that's what they want, but do the best you can and try and have fun with it. So, okay, let's see. We're running. Let's see how much we got here. Our next one is, see here. What else? How many more questions we got here? Okay, only one more. We can squeeze this one in. This is from William. It said, I borrowed a Canon EF 85 millimeter 1.8 lens from a friend. Some pictures, even shooting at 1/100th of a second, came out really blurry. Could be. That's usually that's a pretty good idea. So my rule of thumb is you want to shoot at twice the focal length, shutter speed. So in other words, if you're shooting at 85 millimeters, you want to double that. So 100 is a little to handhold at least. 100 is a little low. You know, you might want to shoot at 1/25th or 1/60th to get a nice sharp picture. But also check your focusing settings. The camera might have been on continuous focus. It might not have been on autofocus. I've had a number of people that have, brought me a camera say, I think my camera's broken. And I look, flip the switch, and that's the problem. They looked at it, they did all that, but they just missed something. So set it up on a tripod and check it first to make sure that the camera's working properly. But chances are, William, it's you, man. I'm telling you, it's just the way it is. Whenever I have a focusing problem, I almost always know it's me. Okay, and the last one is from Eddie. It says, if you're going to purchase a photography course, what would you expect the course to cover? Well, I wish I had, Eddie, I wish I had Photo Mentor Academy launched. We're working on that right now, but I don't right now. So, but I can tell you the kind of things that we're working on. It depends on your skill level. I'm assuming you're a new photographer. And so the thing that I find that bugs me about most of the courses that I've looked at and studied is they tend to focus a lot on the technical and not enough on the artistic. I think that you want something that's going to teach you composition, framing, lighting if possible. Lighting is the key, but lighting can be technical, and it can also make the course a lot more extensive. So that may be the problem. So that, and then mainly focus on your art and your work, and then the technical. I know the technical is probably something that most people have trouble with, but I got to tell you, I can teach anybody the technical stuff. It's learning to see that's the hard part. Learning to recognize an image and what's a good image and what's not a good image. When does an image work? When does it not work? But I would say at a minimum, it should teach you exposure, should teach you, how to understand your settings of your camera, the basics, a little bit about flash, but mainly emphasis heavily on composition and learning to see. I can tell you that the course, it's not even a course, it's more than a course. The stuff that we're doing with Photo Mentor Academy is really oriented toward mentoring. That's the big thing. So it's not just, okay, here's a bunch of videos you're going to be able to watch and then have fun. I don't like that. I want to help people. I want to lead you through either group coaching or individual coaching to help people really understand and find out where they are. Because everybody learns differently. That's the problem. I've seen so many people in these forums and groups say, oh, just go to YouTube. I can learn everything I can from YouTube. Well, that may work for you, but it may not work for somebody else. Buying a book may work for somebody, but it may not work for somebody else. So that's really the trick in all of it. So anyway, I hope that helps. Eddie, if you're interested, shoot me an email. I'll try and help you out and give you some pointers. If you have some questions, I'll be glad to help you out and answer those for you. Again, help@photomentor.tv, and you can send it that way. And I will be glad to try and help you out. Okay, let's see what else we got here. I think that's about it, and that's about it at a time. I want to thank everybody for joining us as usual, and I always have a good time doing this. I always have a good time doing this, and I don't know. It's funny because you wouldn't believe the work that goes into doing something like this, and beforehand. And I somewhat dread it, but then when I end up doing it, I really do like it. And so anyway, I did it again, didn't I? Just pushing the wrong buttons here. All right. Anyway, thanks again for joining me every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And be sure, and if you want to, again, submit some pictures to the to be reviewed, send those to help at send those to help at photomentor.tv with the word review in there, and I'll be glad to help you out. And again, if you have any questions, you can leave them on the Facebook page, or you can always send an email to help at photomentor.tv. Be glad to help you out. Have a good time, and keep shooting.